What is up? Welcome to the very first episode of No One Wants to Work Anymore. My name is Nathan Manny, and I'm the host of this podcast. I intend to have guests in the future, but right now I don't have anybody to talk to. But that's okay because I'm going to keep doing it until hopefully we get some people to come around. I don't think that this economic crisis we're going through for workers is going to end anytime soon. A lot of people are calling what's happening recently the Great Resignation. There's a lot of different words floating around for it, but I think that it's really the culmination of a lot of trends that have been happening already in the U.S. for the last few years. A little bit about myself. I currently am driving for Uber Eats, and it's kind of shitty, but it's, of all the gig apps that I've seen out there, it seems to be where you can get the highest tips. And since most of these gig economy jobs don't really pay very well, you got to look for the ones where you can actually get a decent tip from people. I think that Doordash has a negative reputation. A few years ago, there was like stories about drivers who were stealing food, and my fiance did DoorDash this last summer before she got her part-time job, and a lot of the orders were like $3 or $4 and just kind of didn't pay the bills and add up very well, very easily. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. I went to school, finished my bachelor's degree recently, and so I kind of am coming from this from like, I was already trying to kind of turn my career around. But that's what a lot of people are also doing in this moment. They're kind of trying to like find better jobs that pay more. And that makes sense because I think that jobs in America really suck. And that's kind of what this whole podcast is going to be about, is not necessarily to like just get down on ourselves or like kind of freak out about the society falling apart and there not being the right kind of job for you at the right moment. Just kind of like, it's about survival, but it's also about laughing at some of the stupid demands of employers. It's about talking about issues that employees they're bringing up with their workplaces. They're not getting paid enough. They're not getting benefits. Things being touted as benefits that aren't really benefits. And then amidst all of this, there's the subreddit, of course, AntiWork, which has come into controversy recently. A friend of mine of this podcast and or whatever you want to call it, this show on YouTube, Brad from Album Concept Hour Side B. You can find the videos that I do with him about music in this channel as well. So Brad was kind of saying that he's doing gig work as well, and that he wanted to do something different, and but he wanted more freedom in his life, and this is kind of like what the subreddits are about. And but unfortunately, what happened was, like, he told me that I should talk about the Fox News bit, which was this anchor had one of the moderators from the AntiWork subreddit on, and they were kind of, the Fox News people kind of like roasted them just by that person talking, and a lot of commentators were like, oh my gosh, this is the worst person to speak for the subreddit. But I just wanted to like speak in defense of that person a little bit. Like, they said they were a dog walker, which means that they're probably on one of the dog walking apps, which is just another gig economy app. And it's like, no shit, a lot of people are doing this because these gig economy things afford people so much freedom. And like, I went out for like 2 hours tonight and made like $40. Granted, it's not taxed, so later on I'm gonna have to pay taxes on it. But a lot of people are doing these things just so they can like free up some time in their life, but also because there's like a growing sentiment against like work culture in America, and that's what I think anti-work is really supposed to be about. So the anti-work subreddit, and in my opinion, I think I share the opinion, I should say, with the anti-work subreddit that it's not necessarily that we're like anti-labor. It's that we are against the current status quo of work culture in the United States against this like capitalist status quo. And most of us would like to see a different socioeconomic system at some point in our lives. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we will see it in our lifetimes, but that we should try to fight for it more so, and fight for unionization, fight for better working hours and all of that. And basically changing the way that work is done and the way that we do our labor and make it more democratic. Basically making it so workers control what their labor produces and have more of a say at the workplace. And it's about like being against these authoritarian bosses, or just like they're just being assholes to be assholes. It seems like they're just being mean for no reason other than to boost their own ego. And so this is all really heavy political stuff, but basically I also wanted to say that it's going to be funny because there's a lot of these stupid things that employers do, and we all know in their applications and stuff, or not applications, or job postings, I should say. And there's a lot of like memes floating around about this now, and I don't think it's going to go away, because so long as American work culture is underpaid and underbenefited, we're going to see workers that are pissed off making funny content on the internet. So the show is going to be a mix of that. It's like I'm trying to be like very left of like John Oliver if he just went on and on and on about the state of work culture and different aspects of it. So I don't know. I think we're pretty good on and have an understanding of what this will be about. It's going to be very broad and covering a lot. The subreddit for AntiWork has become this broad thing, and there's a lot of different people with different ideas on there. And so it's not just people like me who are like left wing and want to see all these union things. It's also people who are just like, I want a better job, I want better wages, and maybe they don't understand or think for them. They don't think that for themselves the union route or whatever would be the quickest route. They think, oh, just going and finding a better job in a different industry would help. So I'm not going to like just look at super left wing things on the subreddit. So it's not going to be one segment of the pie, but it's going to be the whole shebang. But the things that I'm not here to do, I'm not going to try to sell people on NFTs or crypto. I think they're garbage. But I will maybe make fun of them at some point, but like, it's not my opinion that these things are tangibly going to affect your life. If you get into them, I'm not here to give financial or job hunting advice or to shame anyone for their work choices. And I believe that sex work is a form of actual work. And yes, burger flipping is a skill. Just ask me and many millions of people at any barbecue with their family or friends where the person cooking the burgers didn't do a good job and you got like a charred brick on your bun. Yeah. And then finally, I'm not here to, bootlick or otherwise support management or administration. That being said, if you look at the rules in the description, when I eventually get chatters and whatever, I just don't want to have a situation where somebody gets like harassed or doxxed for their job posting or whatever. Like, I don't want any to be affiliated with any like of this kind of activity that's kind of harassing activity. But what I am here to talk about is that ridiculousness coming from the employer side of things. The bourgeois class, the owners, the small business tyrants, and the politicians who blindly protect the status quo of work life and that we know today. And this will, like I said before, include examining job postings, but also will be memes and things that are kind of intended to keep you atomized, conquerable, and obedient, and sort of laughing at how poorly they do that job. And then I think finally I would say that I'm in critical support, and critical meaning like I have some criticisms of old labor. That is like old union bureaucracies and the way that they tend to give concessions on behalf of their workers so that workers lose benefits and money while union bureaucrats make about the same money from the dues, and then the employer gets more. I'm kind of not about that thing. I don't want to support. Basically, what I'm saying is I don't want to support like old labor or like the leaders of labor that exist blindly just because they are there and because they have the power. But yeah, so I think I'm going to quickly move on to the next little bit, which is to say that the things we are fighting for are a much higher minimum wage, true health freedom, that is universal single payer health care, the end of at will employment, toward contracts, unions, and worker control. And by that I mean like at will employment is like this stupid thing that's actually coming to bite these people in the ass. It's like everybody's like, no one wants to work anymore. It's like, well, you wrote a contract that said that if I just don't show up, then I said goodbye. Like, you asked for it. You know what I mean? It's so silly to me that that this like institution of American capitalism is proving to be its own downfall. Of break the contract at any time you want. And then I would say the end of the overwork and the beginning of a shorter work week. And I think that there's different schools of thought on how short the work week should be. And that's something that I will explore today in this podcast or live YouTube thing. What about the more radical end of things? Well, like I just was talking about, I think there's some people who would want a radically shorter work week, but we're also talking about like electable and recallable management, and maybe stop treating management or people in those positions as some special class, and also workers' councils and representative government based in our economic democracy, basically socialists transitioning towards classless society where we all just kind of make things to make people not starve and live their lives properly without dying early. And not make people, but like help people. um, and and say finally, I'm not here to have the debate about whether reform works or whether revolution would actually happen. I just want to examine each case in its context, have a laugh, some analysis, and just kind of talk about jobs. And like that's the other thing too, is I forgot to mention, if you call the number listed on the screen or email that, you can leave a message about your story, anything you want to talk about, whether it's just complaining about a situation that happened at work or whatever. I am open to hear it, and I will air it on here, and we'll get more listeners, I think, as we go along, hopefully, and just we'll fill up that mailbox. And when I get those, I'll probably do them after, like I wouldn't probably be able to get to it during the show because I've already made my plan here. But yeah, you could send a message to either of these, either via voice or via text. So yeah, I think the final thing is just check out the rules and description. It's pretty straightforward. Rule number 4 is basically just no fascists. There's this whole thing recently. I should break down that there's like what you would call eco-fascists, people who are like supposedly in favor of protecting the environment, but they propose increasingly fascistic solutions to those problems, and they think that it's because of overpopulation. But in this podcast, this show, we don't consider overpopulation to be a real thing because it isn't a real thing. It's been scientifically disproven. Thomas Malthus, the guy who came up with it, was like, well, when the deer population outgrows its food supply, then a bunch of them start dying off, and that's not good, and that's survival of the whatever. And then it's like, well, but people aren't like deer. We're throwing out food while people starve, and it's because of a distribution problem, not because of those people being there. But anyway, sorry, I'm just rambling again on that stuff. Yeah, so I think I want to start going over some things I found on Reddit and LinkedIn in the last couple of days because that's kind of where the content is going to kind of come from because I will find some funny things on LinkedIn, but I'm also trying to find an actual job. So I'm actually looking for the good ones, the decent ones at least. There's no like amazing job, but speaking of working in the gig economy and doing like Doordash and Uber Eats, there's this Doordash driver's post here, which I found to be pretty screwed up. This customer gave this driver a 1-star rating because they were wearing a mask. So, user Money Mike 3000 said 2 weeks ago, dude made a smart ass comment to me about how masks are pointless. And the next day I see that I have a 1-star rating. All I said to him was that I am just following DD policies and procedures. It had to be him because the only other 2 orders I took that night were hand to me, and both were super friendly, and one even tossed me $5 cash on top of their pre-tip. I chatted support explaining the situation, and they said there's nothing they can do to remove the rating. I know it doesn't really matter since I have 25 stars, but thought it was pretty bogus that DD wouldn't take it off. Yeah, this is BS. Like, I don't think um, that a lot of the negative ratings are warranted on these apps. And I can say that from a place of experience. I'm kind of like this person. I mean, on my Uber, I think I have like a 98% rating. So that means that out of like 100 or so orders, 98 have been good ratings and 2 have been dislikes or like thumbs down ratings. And I think those ratings are from people who are like, they don't put the apartment number on the listing, but and then it says leave at door, and that's like the only instruction, and you do that because you can't get into the lobby and you don't have their apartment number. But then they still give you a 1 because you put it outside by the door. Oh no, my food will be cold. It's like, oh well, I'm sorry that your food, which sat in a room temperature car, getting soggy from sort of baking in its own heat, is going to be like a little bit farther away from your apartment. I mean, it's just it's the way it goes, you know. And I don't understand. I'm just going to put this out there that like as an Uber driver, I get the convenience of being able to have somebody come and bring you your food, but if you don't choose priority and instead you choose to let like your order be grouped with another order, your order could be even later. And I don't know. I feel like if I were paying for the luxury, and let me be clear, I agree with some users on these subreddits that it is a luxury to get DoorDash or to get Uber Eats, that you wouldn't want to wait longer. So you should definitely go with priority, pay that little bit extra, because it's so stupid to just like complain that, you know, when you didn't pay the extra premium. And it's stupid. I know it costs too much. I don't even order from Uber Eats. I think I did maybe when I was full time, a long time ago working. But ever since I started doing Uber Eats, I'm like, oh, I could just go and get this food. There's absolutely no reason for it. But yeah, going to the medical part here, I'm so sick of this situation, and I'm just hoping that people aren't going to be dicks like this in the future. Because you know what, I'm thinking like, even though in my area here in Wisconsin the mask mandate is ending soon, I'm not sure that I'm going to fully return to like never masking in a public place again. Like, I definitely want to take the mask off. It is annoying to have to remember it, but I'm just saying, like, if I'm going to a crowded fast food restaurant, um I will put on that mask. I will put on that mask. Um, yeah, I think it's bullshit. If you're saying that it's bullshit to have to wear a mask, and also saying this bullshit that people aren't wearing them often enough, then I agree with both of those statements. The bullshit is that we're not through this pandemic yet. But yeah, it's this is the worst. This is the worst. But moving on, I guess, from the gig stuff, there's another Reddit post I saw here. And this is kind of, I think, speaking to what we all have been kind of thinking through the economic crises of the past. I guess we're suffering through two of them now. The millennials in the world have suffered through two of them at least now. Um, but one of those crises is just showing us that the rest of the world seems to be advancing, especially developing countries seem to be advancing a lot quicker in terms of wages and benefits for their workers than our country is. This person said, I'm from a third world country, and this sub, AntiWork, has flipped my perspective on the West. Start off by saying that this is a throwaway account since my real account has personal details. Oh, third world worker. Okay. I live in India, which is a third world country according to Western media. People in India always dream about moving to the US and working there because we have an idea that there's no possible better life. Yeah, there's got to be a better life somewhere else, bro. A few of my friends who have emigrated have told me how everyone outside thinks India is an absolute shithole and no one would ever want to come here. Looking at all the bullshit you guys are facing absolutely flips that narrative. I currently have infinitely better working conditions than the average American. Excuse me. For reference, I'm paid 28,000 base per year with covered insurance and pension after currency conversion. Now this doesn't seem much, but my living expenses are so ridiculously low. $320 per month rent and another 30 to 40 in utilities. Yeah, that's a lot lower than what I end up paying. The company provides a laptop and allows work from home if I'm needed to come into the office, which happens 5 days a month. Uber costs $1.50 one way, so around $15 for transportation for the month, and I spend around $130 on the food for the entire month. I get 15 days paid leave, 12 days of sick leave, need a doctor's note for 3 or more days consecutive, and 6 national holidays plus 4 individual specific religious holidays. This is because India has millions of religions, so people need to take different days off. I'm sure they're exaggerating on how many religions there are, but yeah, there's different religions, and that's awesome that they would give people that option. I've never heard in the United States of like, I mean, I'm personally not like Jewish or Muslim, but even in that case, I've never like seen signage that's like, make sure to talk to your manager about your your holidays. Like I think there's in a lot of cases people are taking their PTO for religious holidays, which again is probably BS considering what I've just read here. Granted, with my salary, I would struggle in most places in the U.S., but for when I am located, I think they meant where I live comfortably. Also, healthcare can't even be compared. I go for checkups for various things, general, dental, etc. See, that's not even part of healthcare in the United States. Dental? Are you kidding me? Like teeth are a luxury in the United States. Every 3 to 6 months, they go to various things like dental because it costs barely anything. I'm 25 and fairly healthy without any comorbidities, so my out-of-pocket health expenditures are minimal. Now, I get a little bit nervous about that because it sounds like maybe India has some sort of like health program that might not cover everything if they're talking about out-of-pocket. It says my father is a type 1 diabetic and his insulin costs $75 per month. My brother is a type 1 diabetic and I'm pretty sure his insulin is probably like 3 to 4 times this amount at least per month, and he might not even be getting like the good stuff. I had a dream to go to USA for my master's and work there after. Now I'm really, really considering otherwise. You guys need to fucking riot. Yeah, I agree. I've believed that pretty much my whole adult life. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to share this post because I feel like it definitely does put things into perspective to see how the world looking in on us sees things. And, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would kill for this salary. This is like how much I made working for the state of Wisconsin when I first started, and it changed my life. I worked as a food service employee with UW Madison, and I, yeah, I started off making like, 13-ish dollars an hour. And with healthcare, it came out to about this number. But then if you look at it, this dude says he's paying $320 per month. I mean, as recently as 10 years ago, I was paying probably twice to 2.5 times this price for rent on my own. Now it's a little bit higher, but I have the affordance, not the affordance, but like I have a good support system, and I also have a fiance who has a job. So there's ways for me to overcome that a little bit, and for us to survive. But I think that me and my fiance would kill for $320 per month rent and just $30 to $40 in utilities. So yeah, that's another good Reddit post. But moving on from Reddit posts, I kind of wanted to take a look at. I have a lot of them here, so I don't know how quickly I'll get through them all, but that's okay because eventually we'll get to. I should have mentioned earlier. Eventually we'll get to the main topic, which is in the title. So stay tuned for the minimum wage conversation. But first, I wanted to look at some of these things. A Little Horror in Philly podcast, who's a friend of the show, or a friend of the station, the channel, he showed me this from Twitter, and I just wanted to kind of read this as well, because I don't know if this is real, because it's sometimes hard to tell, like, honestly, whether these posts are real or fake, because they could be exaggerations, but no matter whether the actual premise is real or whether it feels like it was written by an AI, either way, in your heart of hearts that this is the kind of culture we have. And this post to me sounds like somebody, whether they are real or fake, this character or this real person has been totally cucked by capitalism because they're asking, am I the asshole for turning my work phone off on vacation? So I don't even believe I have to ask this, but I'm a bit worried about how things are going to go Tuesday. I recently moved to another team with the company I've worked with for the last 2.5 years. Before I got promoted, I had this last week booked off to visit my sister and first niece, which is a big deal to me. I'm also in Canada, and this Monday is already a holiday as it's family day. The new team... I'm confused what they meant by it's family day. The new team was informed as well, but I could tell my new supervisor was annoyed by it. He even asked if I could reschedule, but I said I could not. I already had to wait a month to meet my niece because my sister is being very cautious with visitors, pandemic, and I wanted to go help her and her husband bond. My last day of work was Monday, and I'm supposed to be back on Tuesday. Monday, when I got to the airport, I turned off my work phone. This week, with my sister and little niece, has been incredible but extremely busy. I barely have had any interest in checking my own phone because of all the catching up and baby time, just relaxing. I noticed a call from a number I do not recognize on Wednesday, but I didn't think much of it. Continued on the next page. Today we are having a lazy day, and I decided to flip my work phone on to see if I had any emails to start prepping for next week. Okay, that's mistake number one. Okay, this is where the cucking is really clear, and I hate that that's become the way that we talk about things. But like, they're just, what I mean is they are so apologetic for things they don't need to be apologetic for, and doing things that they should not be doing while off the clock. Typically, in my opinion, you should not be checking work emails when you're off the clock whatsoever. There might be instances where you decide, like, there's certain people who work from home who have flexibility in their scheduling and they can like log on to do that. But like, if you're gonna like sit down for something that takes like 20 minutes to answer, and especially if you're on vacation in this situation and you pick that phone up and you find these messages, really quick side note to that is that when I was in food service, I had left for a vacation for a Thursday and Friday, and I was going to a family reunion similar to this situation. And my boss was like calling me while I was in Ohio for a family reunion saying like, why didn't you order the bread for Thursday and Friday and Saturday? And I was like, because when I left on Wednesday, I just ordered enough for Thursday because like I wasn't aware that you wanted me to pretend that I knew the future. It's a little bit easier to predict after a days or so. But anyway, you got your manager trying to get your attention when you're on vacation, then you need to scoot out of there. Or, say fuck off. So he says, I had 20 voicemails. Oh my gosh. And hundreds of messages and emails, with over half of them being from my manager demanding why I hadn't zoomed in for meetings and why I wasn't reachable. I checked my phone voicemail and the unknown number was him saying he hoped there was a damn good excuse for why I was off the grid if I wanted to keep my job. He even started out the voicemail with, I'm so sorry you're in the hospital because that's the only reason I should be needing to hunt you down like this. Whoa. That's like, sounds vaguely threatening almost, doesn't it? It's like, hunt you down if you're in the hospital. Like, somebody else already beat your ass. That better be the reason why I can't come and beat your ass. That's kind of what it is. In Slack, I had a few DMs from coworkers. Oh my God, these two people are bootlickers too. I feel to get along with, saying I need to reply ASAP because my absence was impacting them with how mad our boss was. Oh my gosh. So this is like really an example of solidarity that is non-existent or falling apart. Because like he or she is saying these coworkers whom I confided in to get my back were allowing the divide and conquer small business tyrant to come in and psychologically intimidate them into emailing me off work hours on Slack. This is back to the post. This is my first time not being in an entry level position and I'm freaking out. Is the standard that vacations are still worked on? No. That's never been a standard. Are you kidding me? A vacation is you literally vacate the premises. You dipshit. Like, I'm vacating work so that I don't work. Workn't. I'm not working. Work not. Is the standard that vacations are still worked on? That's great. Did I mess up by turning off my work phone? No, you didn't mess up. Tomorrow is a holiday for the whole office. Okay, so this is where it's like, okay, so the whole office has off on one day. That sounds like we're really a family here kind of move. You know what I mean? Like we're just like a family and we're supposed to get each other's back, and that's why everyone is gonna have off on this one Monday that nobody fucking cares about. And then nobody's in the office till Tuesday, and the work culture is so bad that I'm still worried that I might be fired, even if I don't communicate with my boss on the day that everyone has off. Is this bad? Okay, sorry, I'm going to finish the post. When I was in the other department, days off meant days off. Yes, exactly. So I'm just scared I'm missing something and a huge asshole to my boss and team. Edit. Was shaky, so fixed spelling. Sorry. Okay, that's just... This person, I think, needs to just chill. And I think needs to realize that work will be there for them the next day or the next week if they are off. And I think that this is very no one wants to work anymore, because this is part of the reason that no one wants to work anymore, really. I mean, they don't want to have somebody breathing down their neck. They don't want to have this guilty feeling that they didn't help out enough. That's coming from their coworkers. That's ultimately really coming from the boss, because the boss is hounding the coworkers to then go after their coworker. I really don't see how anybody with a modicum of self-respect would stay in a job like this, where they feel this kind of pressure to perform in this way. Anyway. So yeah, this is what I said earlier. Better choice of words would be, these are people who have been, whose psychology, their psyche has been warped by the expectations of this society, and I hope they get better. I hope they've talked to somebody on Reddit, um, who who defends themselves a little bit better than that. Um, yeah, we'll see what, maybe one day we'll see what happens with this story. But and it, like I said, it could be fake, but um, we'll probably won't see what happens. There's so many of these stories. Oh my gosh, this one. This is ridiculous. So, as we said before, a lot of these posts could be fake, but this doesn't look fake. This looks to me like the person is clearly only even taking a section of it. But look at this crap. There, well, I guess you can't fully read it, but they're basically saying something here about how they're changing the market rates, or they're changing their pay rates to match the market rates. And side note, I think it's hilarious that MRA, a market rate adjustment, is in here. It's like, at first I saw MRA and I thought men's rights activist. Oh no. But no, it's market rate adjustments. So apparently this person is being asked to agree to a rate adjustment, and you can see that the new hourly pay rate is almost $3 less. I'm sorry, over $3 less. I'm bad at math. Um, and with an effective date of, oh my gosh, it was a few days ago. This person, I can't remember what the post said, but I hope they quit. This is a really simple one. This is another reason no one wants to work anymore, because, we can talk all day about how somebody might do something malicious like this, where they're going to like actually lower your rate of pay. But a lot of places with inflation, your effective pay rate is going down because the cost of living is going up while this number is staying the same. So even for people who have decent jobs, they're starting to feel the pain of this economy. Even though the stock market is booming. And side note, it's like, I find it curious. I'm not a particularly big defender of Joseph Biden, our president, and I don't really like either party. But I think it's funny that like you don't really hear much about the stock market hurting. You just hear about inflation, and it's like the Republicans are able to really dig into that because they've convinced everyone that Trump is this like working class savior, and because of that, you have people who are able to dominate the narrative that high wages are gonna hurt the economy, make inflation worse because certain places are gonna have to close down. But we're gonna get to more of that in a bit. But that's just a taste of it. I guess what I'm trying to say is that like you can see that even in cases like this where the rates are going down, overall in the country, wages are going up because people are forcing this question. And I'm not really sure what industry this is from and why this is happening, but this is not the norm. Inflation is increasing, but wages also are increasing in a lot of places. And I think that it's kind of like a trend that you're going to see. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But yeah, this is screwed up. All right, here we got a meme that I really liked. So this is Bob. Or no, this is the management talking about Bob. That Bob won't be working with us anymore. And we see Bob's responsibilities and his salary. And his coworkers get all of his responsibilities, but the boss just says, "Have a great day, folks," and walks off with the money, of course. So this is a simple one, This is what's happening in this process too. You got to think of is that, and a lot of firms, I think, have always been short-staffed because so in the 90s there was like the whole revolution of like, oh, all these Japanese companies have Lean Six Sigma and these essentially lean management style is you try to trim all the fat or whatever and make it so each worker is working as much as possible. And you have fewer workers, so therefore you're paying fewer wages, and they're also working more, and therefore the firm is making more money because those two things added up, add to surplus, more of a surplus. And so basically these people would come in there. This still happens too. Like people will come into the workplace and be like, okay, we're going to do some restructuring. And it essentially means like they look at like market rate adjustments, as we just saw, and they think about who should be making what. And then some people get let go because they're like, there's redundancies. There's things happening here that don't need to be happening. There's somebody who's been printing status reports when they only need to be in PDFs or something. You know what I mean? They come up with this bullshit, and then that person is let go the next week, and then everybody else takes on their responsibilities while getting zero increase in pay. That's how you do it. That's how you squeeze blood from a stone. But yeah, I like this meme. It's a good one. Okay, so moving on to some more stuff. So we're also going to look at sometimes the subreddit recruiting hell. I really like this subreddit because sometimes you get stuff from like recruiters, and some recruiters are really good and like class conscious and they know what's happening, and others are really bad. And I think that this particular Don't Feed the Techs Reddit post here from Recruiting Hell really sums up how people feel there's a double standard in the industry. So we'll read it. Dear candidates, it takes you 30 seconds to write an email letting us know you've received a job offer and want to politely remove yourself from our process. I promise you we don't mind. Being a no-show to interview is just not acceptable. You never know where this hiring manager recruiter might end up working down the line. It could be a company that future you desperately wants to work for. That's like that old saying of like, you don't want to piss off that nerdy guy in high school because one day he might be your boss. And it's like, that's kind of a stereotype, and I think that you should just screw off. Um, I've known plenty of jocks who easily got to middle management. It says, don't underestimate how small the world is. Please save all of our time and your personal brand. I almost threw up a little bit in my mouth. And let us know, kindly, recruiters and hiring managers everywhere. Okay, the double standard here is we've all sat waiting at a phone for like an extra week for some sort of acknowledgement that you did or did not get an interview somewhere, right? We've all had. I feel like anybody who's sought a job, anybody who has had an interview that had a timeline for the follow-up has had that experience of like, why hasn't anybody reached out to me? I mean, okay, I'm going to straight up, there was a food service management position that I applied for about 7 years ago now or so that still says interview accepted, which means I went in and said that I accepted the interview, and then they didn't contact me for 7 years, and I didn't get that job, clearly. I had to email them later, but it just means that the manager didn't take her time to go into the HR hiring software that they have in-house to tell me officially that this job was not mine. So it's just like, this is such a double standard. It's like, okay, why are you mad that people are ghosting you? I mean, I get it. It's frustrating in like dating websites and stuff when people ghost you, but like this is a company. Like you're going through hundreds of applicants a day. How do you think that the hundreds of rejections you do every day feel that you didn't contact them with a rejection? Cuz like the response is that people don't mind. I mean, there are people who fear rejection. I'm among them. But people people fear more the ghost than they fear the rejection. And so here, maybe I'm having a double standard because in my head, I don't care if people ghost a company. But a company is a group of people. Corporations are not people. Let's just be clear about that. The corporation is not a person. But yes, the people who are in a corporation collectively make up that corporation. That's true. But that doesn't mean that that company as a whole is entitled to my 30-second email saying that I'm not going to show up. Okay. I'm just going to not show up, and your receptionist is going to be able to sit and look at Facebook and shop on Amazon.com for an extra 30 minutes. And that's fine. Like, just get over it. Whatever. Fuck you. I don't care. So let's go on. Next. This is, oh my gosh. I hate this mentality in life so much. Never say that's not my job. That oozes arrogance and laziness. Laziness, that dastardly thing. How dare people like to rest and recharge. Chip in to help with what needs to be done, even if it's not your responsibility. Do what needs to be done or help someone find the solution, period. Even when nobody's watching. Okay, first of all, someone is always watching. You know that. There's always somebody watching. There's surveillance on every street. And even though most of us are fortunate to not have employers that have put cameras into the bathrooms and stuff like that, we know that there's cameras at work and that at some point somebody reviews that if they have a suspicion about you. And that doesn't have to be even a camera watching. It could also just be your manager who has eyes and ears because there's coworkers who are just dicks and they just want to, like, you know, they think that turning other people in gives them a leg up. So there's always somebody watching. There's always somebody watching at work, what you do. There was a post that I don't think that I have readily available for tonight, but there was a post about a guy who was saying that, like, the coworker he confided in for months turned out to be his snitch and ended up being the one who got him fired. So that's BS. You know what I mean? Like, and to say that, going back though to the thing of like, that's not my job. This is like the things that a contract would help you with. Is like with at-will employment, and even in some contracted positions, even ones I've been in, the end of the contract will have something like, and any other duties as the supervisor assigns or needs. And so it's like, at that point, what's the contract even for then? Because, like, you could make me literally do anything according to this contract. But no, I think that division of labor makes sense. And any place that I've seen this kind of mentality employed, it's usually to the detriment of that company. A good example, and this is again off of my own recent experience with Uber Eats, is like when I go to Panera Bread in town here, it seems like during lunch especially, the line through the door is always obviously much longer than the amount of people ordering online, but that means that the cashier is usually just completely inundated with these orders. Now, in the before times, I think like not even 6 months ago, Panera had this like separate rack for all of their orders, right? And it was accessible to the delivery drivers. But then I guess people probably started stealing food because, as we've addressed, people are poor in this economy and they're stealing food. So anyway, they moved this whole rack behind their cash registers because of this stealing problem. Well, now you have the cashier with the long line having to also get these orders out. Well, one of the last orders I did, I think there was like a manager who was handing out bags. And that just tells you everything you need to know about this hierarchy, is that the manager makes a bullshit decision based on like 2 orders being stolen, that all 3,000 or so of the online orders for the week need to now come behind the cash register. And now you're slowing down the process of getting those orders out. And you're also stressing out your cashiers because you got that manager just kind of hovering around there. And then also the manager gets to look like he's actually doing something during the day because he's handing out the to-go orders. So yeah, this whole never say that's not my job thing. It's like, okay, what do you want me to do? Just divide my attention equally between all of the random tasks that come up. Every time that a customer says that the bathroom is out of paper towel, oh, well, the only person who is not handling food right now is the cashier. How about she goes in there and does it? Yeah. Anyway, this is BS. So, all right, this is a personal one. This is one I just saw the other day and this is kind of like I started off my like official working life as a McDonald's employee. So this speaks to me because this is like exactly the same kind of thing that McDonald's tries to do. They want you to feel like it's a lifestyle choice to be a KFC employee. Come for the job, stay for the career. What career? Like this isn't a career. This is I okay. Let's go with the conflicting messaging of this posting, by the way. And the reality of how we think about as a society how we think about fast food jobs. Typically, you hear that a fast food job is for somebody who is in high school, somebody who doesn't actually need the income, but is like trying to save for something. Like maybe they're living with their parents or they're in high school. This job posting makes it seem like you are about to spend the next 40 years of your life at KFC frying chicken. Come for the job, stay for the career. Life is too short not to work somewhere awesome. Like, I can't imagine anyone in my life right now saying that their goal is to work at KFC for a lifetime. I don't think anybody in the history of mankind has ever said that. No, this is Wanakee. This is Wanakee. Brad's in the chat with me, helping me out through my first show. It seems. Yeah, this is in Wanakee on West Main Street. By the way, the one in Monona is now closed because I think they're too short-staffed to stay open. But aside from the location, which is funny to me because like I get that it's Wanakee. Maybe there are some people who. And side note, no one should be ashamed if they did want this to be their career, but what they should be ashamed of is if they didn't actually fight for anything better in this career. Because look at these, what they consider to be benefits. Competitive pay. Okay, so like something that's probably going to come up a lot in this show is the platitudes that are thrown out for job postings. And this is the biggest one of all, competitive pay. When they tell you competitive pay, it means that one, there is not a culture of sharing your pay with your coworkers in this establishment, meaning that no one has effectively negotiated for higher pay unless they probably became a manager or a team leader or whatever they would call it in this situation. Bonus eligibility. I've never gotten a bonus when I worked in fast food, but this is a little bit different. But I wonder if they are able to sort of tack this in as like a it's hard to tell if this is like something they tack in as like, oh, our executives are bonus eligible, our administrators are bonus eligible, but maybe not necessarily the lower paid. But then because they say, oh, there's growth opportunity, see, that's what they're able to do. They're able to say there's paid training and there's growth opportunity. So they're saying like, oh, you can become part of the executive management team someday and you get a bonus eligibility. And then 401k company matched. Okay. They have to put this here because they're saying we're not paying for your retirement package. They're saying we are matching the amount you decide to put in. So you have to actually go to them and tell them about this. A lot of people don't know that, but like retirement programs are just optional, like sidebars to all of this. A company matched 401k is not terrible, but like you have to actively ask for that. And if you're making substandard wages, which I'm sure you are at this particular KFC, because you don't see anything about wages on here. Even McDonald's these days, in a lot of places, is touting how they start at 15. So this place seems like they probably start lower than that. I'm guessing probably like 10 or 11. And they're saying if you work here, you have to actually beg us to help you fill out that 401k form. So yeah, flexible schedule. This is another, just like competitive pay is one of those platitudes that really just flies in the face of the reality. Flexible schedule is flexible for the employer. Let's be real. That it means that on any given day, they can, like we saw in this Twitter post, they want to be able to email you at any time of day and have you respond in a timely manner. And they want you to like literally drop your niece on the floor, your newborn niece on the floor, and crack her head open, and just so you can talk to Jessica about the expense reports. Yeah, it's so. This is another red flag, though, is that they have the open interviews. That's when you know a company is getting desperate, even for food service, because like there's such high turnover in these places, but they're basically this open interviews always, in my mind, at least in my mind, and this is because my only experience with an open interview was that I got hired. In my mind is that most of the people out of these open interviews are going to get hired, and at least like 25% of them will be fired within a couple weeks because they couldn't keep up with the pace of work in this understaffed restaurant. Like that's the thing, is like, this is something we're going to visit once I actually, in a few minutes here, I'm going to actually finally get to my minimum wage discussion. But that's the reason that there is such high turnover is because this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Life is not too short to work somewhere awesome. Life is too short to work at KFC. That is why this that is why this is a thing. That is why this posting exists. God damn. All right. I think I'm actually thinking I might try to save some of these posts because this is taking up so much of the time, and I wanted to get onto the minimum wage thing. I'm gonna end with one thing. This is like the big story. One of the other big stories of the week, other than the moderator from AntiWork going on Fox News. But this is just funny to me. So a company like Amazon, you'd think that they would be able to. Oh, I'm Brad. I'm drinking tangerine IPA from Potosi right now. It's one of my favorite beers. And I thought it was seasonal, but they apparently it's not seasonal. It's every season. So this posting, it's so funny. It's like Amazon is hiring a software developer manager, and they go you're reading and you're like, oh, this is a pretty standard you must have managed a team of five plus engineers, excellent verbal and written communication skills, experience with C++, Java, or JavaScript. Even in like this kind of IT related position, they're not taking enough care, because you can see here, thank you for your interest in Amazon and taking the time to speak with us about your qualifications and interest in the position. However, unfortunately, the team has decided not to move forward further in the process. So there's a pre-rejection in this. This was shared by Nick Singh, I guess you could call like LinkedIn influencer, somebody who has a lot of clout on LinkedIn, shared this. And it tickled me, because it's like, it just shows you like one kind of like the earlier post about, the earlier post about double standards. It's like, oh, most job postings these days say attention to detail as one of their qualifications, right? This is like the least attention to detail. You let it slip. You put a pre-rejection in your job posting. So just chew on that for a second. Oh man, that makes me laugh so hard. But yeah, I guess I'm gonna have to just flip this down. So I don't have a theme song yet or like major transitions yet, but I figured I was kind of trying to. This is the pilot episode, you know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out my way through it. So I did plan, but I wanted to know what the format was like. And I thought, honestly, I thought that this like meme reading thing would take like 10 minutes. And honestly, there's so much to talk about inside of this stuff that I think it's time to move on to the minimum wage discussion for the final little piece here. So I got this video from, it's got barely any views, ABC Action News. I'm not sure where this station would be from, but I think it's probably just like, like a local station somewhere. But I thought it was pretty funny, and I think we need to watch it and kind of react to it and pull it apart.
Now to the price of paradise. It seems everything is more expensive right now, and as we've been reporting...
Oh, okay. Let's restart that.
Now to the price of paradise. It seems everything is more expensive.
The price of paradise. Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is paradise, lady. I know that's the name of their segment, but like it shows you how out of touch the media is with what's going on
right now. And as we've been reporting, local economists tell us inflation is at a historic level and it's on the rise. Experts say Americans are ready to spend again, but there are simply just not enough products out there to take home. ABC Action News in-depth reporter Mason Morrow shows us.
Okay. So doesn't that sound kind of incongruent? I mean, I know that inflation is like about supply goes lower and the price goes higher. The problem we are dealing with right now, though, is not a lack of supply. It is the slowness of the supply chain. And a lot of economists that I have heard from have pointed out how inflation is, it's not so much that it's artificial, it's just that the people selling things are able to say, fuck it, since it's going so slow, I can charge more for the process of getting it to you. And so all of these transportation costs across the board are shooting prices up. And let's be clear, like, as workers watching this and enjoying this content, we all know that inflation has already been happening. I'm not going to bring it up today, but there's a separate article all about how the price of a Big Mac has been going up with the price of inflation, while workers' wages have not been so much. Anyway.
How one Bay Area family is trying to navigate these sky-high prices while living on low wages.
The Christmas season is upon us, which means many families here in Tampa Bay are out shopping for Christmas gifts, but there are some families who simply can't afford to place presents under the tree this year.
I try to explain to them that it should be better next year.
Pierre Fitzgerald set up the family Christmas tree in the living room of his Clearwater home. But the holidays won't feel the same for the single father and his 3 kids.
I try not to think about it. I just try to keep going every day.
Okay, so like that's once again the incongruence of this whole segment starting off as like the price of paradise, and then this guy who like clearly is living in near poverty. Like he doesn't seem like he's destitute yet, but he's definitely not like living large. And people are like, this is the price of paradise, baby. It's like, this isn't a dude who's like struggling with paying his cable bill every month. This guy is like choosing between rent and food.
Fitzgerald moved to Clearwater from Cleveland, Ohio with his trio about 8 months ago. After his job as a warehouse worker was eliminated due to COVID cutbacks, he took up a temporary job at Walgreens. That lasted only 2 months.
When I lost that, it was like I couldn't afford to even live in the hotel.
The Fitzgeralds were forced to turn to Grace House Shelter, housing provided by Hope Villages of America.
So he was living in a hotel. So this tells you even more. It's like, this isn't even his house. It's a shelter. He was living in a hotel before that because he couldn't afford, probably the months in advance rent. in whatever place he is living. And it doesn't also look like it's any particularly like expensive region in the United States. This is like normal people. Anyway.
For families living with homelessness.
It was like getting frustrated, it's like sharing a bed with your kid.
Now the family that lived near Lake Erie
sharing a bed with his
thinks
kid.
St. Vincent de Paul cares for its 2-bed Pinellas County house. The Fitzgerald father works at Wendy's in order to put food on the dinner table.
Hey, it's difficult, man. Every dollar is stretched the right way. You have to make sure that everything is taken care of.
Fitzgerald makes $11 an hour, just $1 more than Florida's new state minimum wage.
Okay, they're in Florida, and okay, that makes me feel like my state's a little bit more backward than I thought it would be. We don't have a $10 minimum wage. Florida does, though. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, that's a wealthier state, but he only makes $11 per hour there. I mean, come on, like, if you live in Florida, and I don't know, I just can't imagine. The cost of living can't be that much higher in Florida, but they are definitely a bigger state than Wisconsin.
$10 sound like a livable wage to you?
No.
Absolutely not.
Thanks to Florida voters in 2020, the minimum wage was raised from $8.65 to $10 this past September. It will increase by $1 every year until the wage reaches $15 in 2026.
If we had taken
That is so frustrating to hear, because like you're thinking like, oh my God, it's people need this money now. And the best we can do is get these like milquetoast agreements to be like, eventually by like 2026, everyone will make $15 an hour. And hopefully by then the Big Mac will only cost $15. And I mean, I keep saying the Big Mac, but that's because this stupid economy compares everything to the price of food and shit, and like the worst kind of food too. But you know what I'm saying? It's just like people can't even get the things that were promised by this American dream on these wages.
that $15 and adjusted it for inflation, then that really should be $24 an hour.
Inflation is hurting wallets across the country.
Yes.
I looked into the latest data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and found the annual prices of all goods went up 6.2% in October, the highest inflation spike in over 30 years. Mike Snipes, an economics instructor at the University of South Florida, tells me Americans want to spend again, but chain supply issues persist from the pandemic.
It's really both of those factors coming into play that's kind of causing this inflation that we're seeing.
Food's going up, the gas is going up, and it's like there's no way to
Like we said earlier, that's because of those transportation costs.
even really balance it out, I guess.
Fitzgerald is spot on. Breaking down the historic rise in costs, gas is 50% pricier, food costs more, with meat and eggs up 12%, and the cost of other essential commodities like clothes are nearly 8.5% more.
So the guy was just like, oh, he's spot on. It's like, that's the thing, is it doesn't take an economics degree to understand what's happening here. To understand that these costs are rising despite the fact that they don't need to rise necessarily. These are just, it's because of this crunch that companies are taking advantage of our wallets.
More expensive. Yet Snipes says wages don't reflect the higher cost of living. And in his mind, they haven't for 20 years.
Until we get wages that match up with inflation, I mean, things are going to be rough. Things are going to stay rough.
But whether it's hope for the sake of his kids or just
I
the
agree with
holiday
this guy.
spirit, Fitzgerald keeps his spirits high that his family will learn to live comfortably soon enough.
Things will get better, though. No matter what goes on, things will get better.
In Tampa Bay, I'm in-depth reporter Mason Morrow, ABC Action News.
Meanwhile, here's the price point and how inflation is affecting lower wage workers. The Florida minimum wage will rise by $1 each year until it's $15 an hour in 2026. Economists tell us the real living wage should be $24 an hour. Also, a Gallup poll survey in November.
That is the crux of the problem, is that, and as I was saying before, is that you have this bill that was passed supposedly in Florida where $15 will be the minimum by 2026. But if you look at what people actually need, it's more like $24 an hour. And that's kind of why I put the sensational $69 an hour on the thumbnail. Like, personally, I would love that. And I don't give a shit. Fuck your corporate profits. Let's just say $69 an hour. Screw it. That's the end. But we obviously know that that's unrealistic, but the higher the number you push for, more likely that you're going to get something in the range up to that number. So I think that part of the problem with how we've been looking at minimum wage as far as fighting for it from our left-wing side is that it's kind of a low ball negotiation starting point. We need to be fighting for something higher than 15. And it's like the fact that some Florida news station is letting that hit the air. Like, it's clear that it's becoming more mainstream too.
Number revealed 45% of Americans admitted to financial struggles. 1/3 of Americans who make less than $40,000 a year reported detrimental hardships from these high prices. For a full breakdown of this report, go to our website, abcactionnews.com.
All right. So I think it's basically this great resignation thing is sort of related to the wage gap as well. And I think that's where the basis starting point of this conversation is that people are looking for higher wages, and they are also looking for ways to combat inflation because of those higher wages. And the only way that seems to be working for them is to leave their jobs and go elsewhere. And also, some people have been trying to unionize. I mean, I'm sure you heard about, but Starbucks workers are starting to unionize, and they have their own struggles in that. But the thing that I wanted to kind of ease into, and the thing is like, we're going to look at a lot of mainstream sources here, but we might also look at some left-wing sources. And I wanted to be clear that even though I'm left-wing, I like to look at the mainstream and what they're thinking, obviously as a reaction thing. Like, reaction content is about that. It's about pointing out what might be wrong and something that just kind of gets said without being challenged. And so that's kind of where I'm at. I was like, I'm going to go through these a little bit. We're going to ease ourselves into the radical stuff. So about Americans, the Great Resignation. I'm going to kind of skim over this article, but it says record number of American workers quit their jobs last year. We know that. Of the 68.9 million separations in 2021, 47.4 million jobs were left voluntarily. So that's like 2/3 of the jobs were voluntarily left. Over 2/3. Despite a historic number of job openings, many of the workers who quit never looked for a new gig. You know, that's kind of how I feel. I mean, I've been looking for a new gig, but I've been selective. And part of that is because I'm able to use my position in the gig economy to kind of wade through the hard times. And I think a lot of people are doing that for obvious reasons. Millions of people have left the labor force altogether to take care of family, retire early, live on savings, or otherwise reassess their lives in COVID. I took off to be able to go to school before COVID started, and then it hit. But I do know that a lot of people actually did start their journey on this process in the pandemic. I think that's fair to say. The challenge now is how to get them back. Yeah, how do we get people back to work in this shitty economy with low wages? It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. Here's the math from the economist at Goldman Sachs. Some 2.5 million people are missing from the workforce. About 800,000 of those have retired early, many supported by rising home equity and stock portfolios. That leaves 1.7 million people to entice back into the jobs market, many of them prime age workers with many years ahead of them in the job market. So this is saying, like, what holds them back? You know, they have COVID-related concerns. They have a financial cushion, which, okay, one of the biggest myths in my mind is this financial cushion thing, especially when it comes to the meager amount of money that the U.S. government gave us in response to this. There might be some people that got unemployment that had investments that have that financial cushion, but I think it's a little bit out of touch to say that the financial cushion is 100% responsible. I'm sorry, That would be unfair to this paragraph. I wouldn't say that this is one of the prime reasonings behind this shift, because I think a lot of people may be in a lot of debt who are able to just barely scrape by paying those minimums, who don't have the cushion anymore. The cushion has been popped and they are like one emergency away. But they hate their previous jobs so much that they would never go back to it. And they are standing strong and firm until they get something better. And that's the third thing. Their lifestyle has changed. Like, there's a lot of people in the pandemic who realized that their work-life balance was not a balance at all. It was completely off. Says here that people may be likely to come back with reduced savings or when they get the ability to mitigate the health risks of the pandemic. True, but once again, that's kind of what I think is, there's trends you can point to that already show this evidence. So I think these people are a little bit behind the ball, but I think that overall it's true that there's people that are re-entering, but they are either strategically using positions for a short time to get savings back, or they are doing gig work to avoid having to show up to work for one of those tyrants. So I don't think that's. I think that this is. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think that this assessment is a little bit lacking in its nuance. Anyway, you would expect that, I think, though, from Goldman Sachs. Goldman figures 1 million people will come back into the workforce this year, raising the labor force participation rate to a healthier but still substandard 62.6%. Oof! By the end of the year. More workers will come back into the job market in the years ahead, the economists note. Even so, the depressed participation rate implies that workers will be even harder to find than the unemployment rate suggests. Harder to find and with a new perspective. Now, this is the meat of this article that I think really, really, really puts my argument about I'm going to say it. We should raise the minimum wage to ease inflation. That is, the title of this video is asking that question. I'm answering it yes, affirmatively. I think that the Great Resignation and the inflation crisis would be solved by this. And I think you can see that that the most turnover in these positions is obviously in these accommodation and food services by a mile. I'm not a mathematician and I'm really bad at reading graphs, but it says that the hires rate and the quit rate, they are hiring almost as much as they're firing in this industry. That's what this means. And then look at the other end of the spectrum. Financial activities. I wonder why. I wonder why the people who run the financial sector, the people who have the most investments, are the ones doing the best and that have the lowest amount of hiring and quitting. It's because it's a stable industry where everybody gets a little slice of a much larger pie. This is an industry where all of that wealth is going back into making sure that people keep eating McDonald's, and also probably going into funds, overseas bank accounts that we don't ever see. And that's kind of the point, is that like this is like an inequality graph of sorts. It's like the closer you get to a low wage position, the more likely you are to see this insane amount of turnover, in which the turnover itself is probably a component of the industry. You could put it as its own balance sheet. And that's ridiculous. But they're also saying here that companies are already adapting to this, and I think that you're going to see that a lot more, but like it's obviously not happening fast enough. We're seeing a lot of churn in the jobs market. Neela Richardson, chief economist at payroll processor ADP, told me. They're seeing that hires are happening a lot, but a lot of people are also turning over. And it just shows that people are trying things out, and they're finding that no matter what things are put in their face to entice them to a lot of these jobs, there's just nothing that is enough. Now, I kind of wanted to, I think there's maybe a little bit more of this that I thought was interesting. Yeah, I think this ending here where it says the employer is always driving the car. They're the ones who are deciding the opportunities, the pay, the skills, the job description, the hours. But they are more than ever listening to the workforce and trying to incorporate that and be sensitive. That is because the workforce is so pissed off. They're quitting and leaving and changing and trying different things because people just don't want to do this dance anymore. And I don't think it's. This article seems to imply that it gives employees rather a lot more power than they used to have. But I think until you see actual like unionization efforts, that power is really only in the individual, because this story is one of people making better choices for themselves. But just because one person decides to try to better themselves doesn't mean that everyone else gets that opportunity. We have to be mindful of that, is that a lot of these people that are going for the big upgrade have affordances in their lives, and they have support systems that allow them to do it. I feel very fortunate for having a support system that allowed me to finish my college degree recently. And I'm going to add that I think while a lot of people say that it's not worth it to get one anymore, I think it's always worth it, as long as you maybe budget it out. And that's the thing, is like everybody wants more money so they can also plan for their future. Like, people aren't able to plan for the future on these wages. Now, I wanted to go a little bit further on the left. Once again, this isn't a super leftist publication. This is The Atlantic. This is like a center-right publication, if you think about it. But this opinion article says the counterintuitive workings of the minimum wage, the benefits of a $15 minimum would greatly outweigh the costs, by Annie Lowry. The Biden administration and House and Senate Democrats want to raise the national minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour. Good. The result would be straightforward: higher wages, but also the closure of mom and pop stores, higher prices on everything from gas station tacos to daycare, a rise in unemployment, particularly among teenagers, and strain in low-wage rural economies. So this was written last year around this time. And now inflation has happened. And wages haven't been really going up that fast. We did read in the previous articles that, yes, inflation, while going up, wages are going up in some cases, but there is no federal minimum wage increase. There is no binding wage increase upon the entire country. And this closure of stores is already happening. You know, what's going on here? Well, I like this article because this Annie Lowry person sort of is sympathetic to the higher wage arguments. That at least is the argument being made by economists, businesses, lobbying groups, and conservative politicians as the proposal comes under congressional consideration. It is an intuitive one. Democrats are proposing to more than double the wage floor to its highest ever level, asking tens of thousands of businesses to give large raises to millions of workers. Make something more expensive, people buy less of it. Make the wage floor higher, businesses will buy less low-wage work. Yet minimum wages have a way of screwing with economic intuition and complicating the simple logic of supply and demand. Yes, simp logic of supply and demand. It's so whenever I hear somebody say supply and demand, they're thinking supply side. They're like, oh, I'm Ronald Reagan's progenitor. I don't even know. I'm sorry. Drinking. But this person's arguing that the benefits would greatly outweigh the costs, and I agree. The new economic evidence suggests that these costs might be small ones. Anyway, even in low-wage, low-density, low-cost-of-living parts of the country, a $15 minimum wage might not be a death knell for small businesses or a job killer for low-wage workers, probably because, as we've discussed 100,000 times before, this inflationary crisis is only ramping up something that has been going on for years. We've already seen pretty high inflation and price increases across the board. Like that guy in the Florida video we saw just a little bit ago talking about how the cost of everything has gone up for him. That's what's happening, is that even in low cost of living parts of the country, people are seeing these increases, and it would really help them to have a little bit extra in their check. So the Democrats, of course, are pushing for this wage floor of 15 by 2025. And of course, we talked about why that is probably too little too late. But they're also talking about getting rid of tipped wages, which I think is interesting, because like they should do that. They should raise servers' wages as well, and put less of the burden on the customer to pay people a living wage. But they raise these concerns of first is how many businesses might not be able to make the pay hike mandate work without laying off employees or not hiring them in the first place. Business, I thought, was supposed to be about, and this is like totally a devil's advocate, even though it doesn't need to happen, argument, but business is supposed to be cutthroat. You're supposed to be competitive. If somebody else can do it at a lower price than you or more efficiently, puts you out of business, that's on you, bro, isn't it? And that's kind of what's bothering me about this narrative of like, oh, all these smaller businesses would just fail under this crushing weight. It's like, if you are in business and you can't afford to pay living wages to your employees, should you be in business? Seriously? I mean, like, if your business is literally failing already under the strain of these low wages, and you can barely hold it together under that, and the straw that breaks the camel's back is going to be $15 an hour for your employees, then maybe you shouldn't be in business at all. I mean, no offense. No, totally offense meant. It's just like, it doesn't. And that's kind of what I think this whole thing is arguing, is like, as we go on, there's a mention of like a Darwinian argument. Let me speed up here a little bit on this. I want to maybe I could just do, find. Yeah, some businesses might not be able to make the math work with a higher wage base. Those tend to be businesses that were struggling to begin with and might not have made it anyway. The minimum wage seems to be Darwinian, driving weak competitors out of business. One study, for instance, showed that a company with 3.5 star average on Yelp is more likely to fail after a minimum wage hike, but a 5-star company is not. No shit. If people are giving this business 3.5 stars, three things kind of happen in my mind. It's one, I think that the employee is probably unhappy. They don't make enough. Two, they don't have any benefits. And three, they don't have any time off. Third, coming in probably more than they want to, even though they said that they only needed 15 hours a week. Or maybe they're somebody who wanted full time and they're getting the fewest hours. And just because the boss is like complaining that the person keeps saying, oh, can I have more hours? I've had that situation before. I worked in a bar before that shouldn't be open because they can't pay a living wage. And because the owners decide to enrich themselves rather than give back into the bar. So you've got a failing bar, failing business. Who knows how long it'll last? And it's just like, if you can't pay, then you can't play. That's kind of what I think. It's simple as that. Is it worth keeping the minimum wage low to save those firms? No. And not to keep high profits of others. That's the other aspect of this, is that when a company says they don't have the money to give out a raise, that's because we as a society are taught that their profits aren't actually profits, but they are projected amounts of money that are good for the company, that if any of that were cut into would be detrimental. But every year over year, these companies want to make a higher profit without spending as much. They want to squeeze more out of the lemon than they got the last time. So it's like, it's this contradictory thing where it's like, we're we say the minimum wage is propping up failing businesses, but it's also propping up the profits of larger companies. And there is no like middle ground there. And wage workers don't get anything out of that. So anyway, I just think that it's interesting that, you know, even in the mainstream media, we have the hemming at the edges here. And I just wanted to, two more things here I wanted to talk about, where the Stanford professor who pointed out that working as many hours as people do in the United States is just pointless. You're doing less. And the basic theory in this is that the more that people work beyond those 40 hours, the more that they spend time at work in overtime mode, the less they're getting done because they're getting tired, they're getting worn down, they're actually making more mistakes. They might be screwing up products and then having to remake them if they're in a factory or a food service setting. So it's really not beneficial to have people working more than 40 hours a week. And even in that case, it should be lower probably. And there's, I think, a little bit of extra BS in this article that I don't care about. But the final thing I want to talk about is that let's look at an extreme argument. This is our extreme argument for the week, and this is the argument for a 4-hour day. Basically, the IWW, the International Workers of the World, is an anarchist organization. They believe in one big union covering all workers. And I've had agreements and disagreements with them, but I agree very strongly with their argument for the 4-hour day. This pamphlet is a revised edition, one that appeared in Libertarian Labor Review number 1 in 1986. And it's based on a presentation on the fight for a shorter work week. And essentially, they're just trying to go over how the legal norm, what we know, is the 40-hour work week, and how even though this is a traditional norm, it's not realized in our society. There's a lot of people putting in more than that work, even if they work part-time, as it says here in the beginning of the article. Even if they work part-time, they're likely working a few part-time jobs just to make ends meet, and they're working like 45 or more hours a week. And on top of that, you got all the people that are working overtime and all the people who are unemployed. And there's just an imbalance there. And they talk about how people are just like working themselves out of their jobs because they're creating higher standards, which cause people to work faster. And then it causes people to get fired. It's kind of like the lean management thing that we were talking about before, with people who come in to kind of like tell workers to work faster so that other people who are slower end up getting the axe, and the redundancy is eliminated. The end results, I think, of this article, though, is that they talk about a 4-hour work week and talking about how the 4-hour day. And it says, I guess I'll just read what they say here. Not only is the work week not being cut over the last 50 years, it has grown substantially longer for millions of workers. This retreat on the shorter hours front follows more than a century of battles for a shorter work week. Shorter hours, of course, are not a panacea. Minor cuts in the work week, say to fit 35 or 32, would not eliminate unemployment, nor would they bring an end to the exploitation that we suffer every day on the job. But they could, if coupled with a strong fight against overtime and speed-ups, and effective resistance to pay cuts, lead to quantitative and qualitative improvement in our lives. And so they're basically saying that like the 4-hour week is maybe not realizable in the short term, but the most radical fighters could fight for this. And that's, like I said before, with the minimum wage, you got to shoot for a higher number. And so like, you know, we heard from a pretty mainstream guy that the minimum wage should be $24 an hour. Well, why can't we start pushing into the mainstream more arguments about the length of the work week too? So, yeah, that's kind of where I came to an end with this particular segment in my head of like, how do I really, you know, relate my pretty extreme out there radicalness to these fights, and I think that's the lesson. Is that we need to dream a little bit bigger about what the goal is. I think we need to fight for shorter work weeks, drastically shorter work weeks, and dramatically higher wages, because there's room for this in our society. It's just that every time that the wage conversation comes into play, it takes a backseat to the profit conversation. It takes a backseat to the how are we going to pay for it conversation? Because how is that small mom and pop bar on the corner of a street in bumfuck Wisconsin going to pay its workers $15 an hour? Well, guess what? The owner never planned to pay the workers $15 an hour, and he has back rent or something, or back mortgage or whatever. That's the kind of thing that is the problem, is that we have our politics, I think, are held hostage by bosses and by people whose best interest is making enough money to buy their second home. Whereas for the most part, the workers are worried about whether to pay rent or pay for food for the month. So that's basically what this show is about. That's about all I have for tonight as well. Thanks for watching. I'm really glad that I got a chance to talk about this topic, though, because it's been on my mind. I'm on the job hunt. You can join me on the job hunt. I'm going to come back here every Wednesday with another topic to talk about. And it's all going to be related to these jobs. And as you can see, there's always a lot to talk about. I want to get more people involved in this if I can, make sure that it's an interactive experience. And hopefully the live show will become more than just me chatting here, and more than just Brad coming in to hang out with me. But thank you for hanging out with me. As I said, I will be back here next Wednesday. I haven't quite figured out what the topic is going to be yet. And I don't have any outro or intro, but if anybody has any suggestions for any of that, and any memes, anything, can go to my Gmail account, right there on the screen, flyoverstatetelevision@gmail.com. You can also leave a voicemail at 608-616-9439. Have a good night. Thanks for watching.